A racist detective laughs at a black woman's crucial tip about a missing girl. But that detective just made the biggest mistake of his career. This is the story of how one man's arrogance led to his complete and total destruction. The air in the 17th precinct is stale. It smells of burnt coffee, cheap disinfectant, and the slow decay of hope. This precinct is a kingdom, and Detective Miles Corbin is its king. He sits behind a scarred metal desk, a throne of chipped paint and cynicism. Corbin is a man carved from granite and prejudice. His face is a roadmap of scowls, his eyes small, hard chips of ice that see the world not as it is, but as he believes it should be. He holds his coffee mug, stained brown with years of neglect, like a scepter. On the wall behind him, a collection of framed commendations tells a story of heroism. But up close, dust coats the glass, and the pictures inside are faded. They are relics of a different man, or perhaps a different lie. Today, King Corbin is bored. The case of the missing girl, Lillian Thompson, has the city in a panic, the media in a frenzy. For Corbin, it's just noise. He's seen it all before. A pretty white girl from a good family vanishes, and the world stops turning. He'll go through the motions, collect his overtime, and it will end the way these things always end. Tragically. He takes a long, loud slurp of his coffee. It is a sound of profound indifference. Then, a shadow falls over his desk. He looks up, annoyance already hardening his features. Before him stands a young woman. Imani Wallace. She looks like a gentle breeze could knock her over. She wears a simple cardigan over a plain dress, the kind of clothes that are meant to make a person disappear. Her hands clutch the strap of her tote bag, her knuckles white. She is visibly nervous, her eyes wide and uncertain in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the bullpen. Corbin's gaze sweeps over her, a human filing system of bigotry. Young. Black. From the look of her, probably from the east side, the part of the city he and his men refer to as the Zoo. He has already dismissed her. He has already solved the mystery of who she is and why she is here. She is a waste of his time. Help you, he asks, the words clipped, impatient. Detective Corbin. Imani's voice is soft, almost a whisper against the precinct's din. You're looking at him. What do you want? I'm busy, he gestures vaguely at the mountain of paperwork on his desk, a prop he uses to deter civilians. It's about Lillian Thompson, she says, taking a small step forward. The missing girl. I think I have some information. Corbin leans back in his chair, the ancient springs groaning in protest. A slow, condescending smile spreads across his lips. Information, he repeats, drawing the word out as if tasting something foul. And who are you? A psychic? Another concerned citizen who had a dream. My name is Imani Wallace. I'm a librarian. I was doing some research, cross-referencing old articles in our digital archive, and I found something. A pattern. Librarian. The word confirms every one of his assumptions. She's a nobody. A book pusher with an overactive imagination, probably fueled by too many crime novels. A pattern, he scoffs, louder this time, playing to the audience of uniformed officers around him. A few of them snicker. Let me guess. You connected the dots. You cracked the case the entire police force couldn't. Tell me, Miss Wallace, where have we been going wrong? His sarcasm is a physical thing, a thick, greasy cloud that fills the space between them. Imani flinches but holds her ground. She opens her tote bag and pulls out a neatly organized file folder. It's not just Lillian, she says, her voice gaining a sliver of confidence. There have been others. For other girls, over the last 15 years. They all disappeared within the same 3-block radius, all on a Tuesday, all near a bus stop. She tries to hand him the folder. He doesn't move to take it. He just stares at it, then back at her face, his expression one of theatrical pity. With all due respect, what you have there is a bunch of coincidences. What we have here, he taps his temple, is years of experience. We do the real police work. We don't just sit in a library making up stories. But the details, she insists, her voice trembling slightly. The cases are almost identical. The girls were all around the same age. But because they weren't from the right neighborhoods, because they weren't what? Corbin interrupts, his voice turning sharp. Go on, say it. Because they were black, Imani says, her voice finally steady. And Hispanic. Their cases went cold in a week. No media coverage. No task force. Corbin lets out a short, barking laugh. He finally takes the folder from her hand. He opens it, gives the contents a cursory glance, his eyes scanning the names and dates with utter disinterest. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he closes the folder. He holds her gaze. And he begins to tear the papers in half. Once. Twice. The sound of ripping paper is obscenely loud in the suddenly quiet bullpen. Imani gasps, a small, wounded sound. Corbin lets the shredded pieces of her work, her hours of meticulous research, flutter from his fingers into the trash can beside his desk. There, he says, wiping his hands together as if cleaning them of dirt. Case closed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a real investigation to run. Go home, Miss Wallace. Watch some TV. Leave the thinking to the professionals. He turns back to his computer, a clear dismissal. The king has passed his judgment. The audience is over. Imani just stands there, the ghost of her hard work lying in his garbage. She doesn't move. She can feel the eyes of the other officers on her, a mixture of pity and amusement. She is a joke. A brief, pathetic distraction in their very important day. But something inside her, a core of steel she didn't know she possessed, refuses to break. She takes a deep breath. You didn't even read it, she says, her voice no longer soft. It is cold. Accusatory. Corbin sighs dramatically, swiveling his chair back around. The mask of weary professionalism is gone. Now, his face is pure, undiluted irritation. What did you say to me? I said you didn't read it. You didn't look at the names. You didn't look at the dates. You just looked at me and decided it was garbage. I looked at you and decided you're a bored woman with a hero complex, Corbin snarls. You people are all the same. You see a camera crew on your block and suddenly you're an expert. You think you know better than men who have been wearing a badge longer than you've been alive. He stands up, using his height to intimidate her. He is a wall of condescension. Rollins, he barks, not taking his eyes off Imani. A younger officer, eager and sycophantic, scurries over. Yeah, detective. Officer Rollins, meet our newest consultant, Corbin says, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Miss Wallace here, the librarian, has cracked the Thompson case wide open. Apparently, it's a conspiracy going back 15 years. Tell him your theory, Miss Wallace. Entertain us. Rollins smirks on cue, a cheap imitation of his mentor's sneer. A librarian, huh? You find the bad guy in the Dewey Decimal System. The two men chuckle. The humiliation is now a spectacle. Imani's face burns, but her gaze remains locked on Corbin. She will not be cowed. She will not be broken. The first girl was named Tasha Williams, Imani says, her voice cutting through their laughter. She disappeared 15 years ago. She was 14. She lived 3 blocks from where Lillian was last seen. Corbin's smile falters for a fraction of a second. The name hangs in the air, an unwelcome ghost. I don't know who you're talking about, he says, his voice flat. Her file says you do, Imani presses. It says you were the lead detective. It says the case was closed after 2 weeks. No viable leads, that's what you wrote. Corbin's eyes narrow. The game is no longer fun for him. This woman is not just persistent, she is challenging his authority. His history. I've worked hundreds of cases, he says, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. I don't remember every single one. Especially not some dead-end case from a decade and a half ago. You'd remember if her name was Lillian Thompson, Imani shoots back. Silence. The air crackles. Corbin takes a step closer, invading her personal space. He looms over her. Listen to me very carefully, he says, his voice barely a whisper now, but more threatening than any shout. You are interfering with an active police investigation. That is a felony. You are making baseless accusations against a decorated officer. That is career suicide, if you even have a career to speak of. He leans in, his breath hot and smelling of stale coffee. You are on the verge of being arrested for obstruction of justice. Do you understand me? You walk out of this precinct right now. You go back to your little library. And you forget you ever came here. You forget my name. You forget Tasha Williams. Or I swear to God, the next library you see will be the one in the state penitentiary. It is a raw, undisguised threat. The promise of total ruin. He expects her to crumble. To burst into tears. To run away. That is what people like her are supposed to do when faced with a man like him. But Imani Wallace does not crumble. He sees a flicker of something in her eyes. It is not fear. It is fire. He has made a grave miscalculation. He thought he was pouring water on an ember. Instead, he has just thrown gasoline on a flame. Her mother came here, Imani says, her voice shaking with a rage she can no longer contain. Tasha's mother. She came here every day for a month. She sat on that hard bench over there, waiting for you. Waiting for an update. An answer. Anything. And you know what you did, Detective Corbin. Corbin says nothing. His jaw is clenched so tight a muscle spasms in his cheek. You had an officer tell her to stop coming. You told her she was being a nuisance. You told her to go home and mourn in private. You didn't just close her daughter's case, you erased her. You made a grieving mother feel like a criminal for wanting justice for her child. This is the line. This is the moral event horizon. In this moment, Imani Wallace is no longer just an advocate for a forgotten victim. She is an avenger. Corbin's face contorts into a mask of pure fury. The carefully constructed facade of the grizzled, seen-it-all cop shatters, revealing the ugly, petty tyrant beneath. That's it, he seethes. You're done. He grabs her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons. Rollins. Cuff her. Obstruction, harassment of an officer, public nuisance, I don't care. Get her out of my sight. Rollins, looking slightly panicked by the sudden escalation, fumbles for his handcuffs. He reaches for Imani's other arm. The precinct holds its breath. This is the breaking point. The moment of absolute injustice. Imani is being manhandled, about to be arrested for the crime of seeking justice, for the crime of remembering a name he wanted forgotten. She is at the precinct door, Rollins twisting her arm behind her back. The cold metal of the cuffs is about to touch her skin. And then it happens. The main doors of the 17th precinct swing open. They don't just open, they are thrown open, as if by a great gust of wind. They slam against the interior walls with a deafening crack. Every head in the bullpen snaps toward the entrance. 3 men stand silhouetted against the bright afternoon light. The 2 on the flanks are built like refrigerators, their dark suits failing to conceal the hardware on their hips. They radiate an aura of quiet, lethal competence. The man in the center is older, with silver hair and a face that looks like it was chiseled from worry and authority. He wears a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it seems to have been woven onto his body. His eyes, a piercing blue, sweep across the room, taking in the entire scene in an instant. The chaos. The shouting. The young woman being forced into handcuffs by a uniformed officer. Corbin freezes, his hand still on Imani's arm. Rollins stops fumbling with his cuffs, his mouth slightly agape. The air in the room changes. The stale, oppressive atmosphere is suddenly charged with a new, formidable energy. The man in the suit ignores everyone. He ignores the captain who is now scurrying out of his office. He ignores Detective Miles Corbin, the self-proclaimed king of this domain. His gaze locks onto Imani Wallace. He strides forward, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the grimy linoleum floor. He walks directly to her. He stops a foot away, his expression unreadable. The two flanking men position themselves, cutting off Corbin and Rollins from any movement. The entire precinct is silent, a tableau of confusion and shock. The man in the suit speaks. His voice is not loud, but it cuts through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. It is a voice accustomed to absolute, unquestioning obedience. "Agent Wallace," he says. The words drop into the room like stones into a still pond. Ripples of disbelief spread through the assembled officers. Corbin's face, which had been flushed with rage, drains of all color. He looks from the man to Imani and back again, his mind refusing to process what his ears just heard. The man in the suit continues, his eye still fixed on Imani. "I trust your preliminary assessment is complete." Imani Wallace undergoes a transformation. It is instantaneous. It is absolute. The nervous, trembling librarian vanishes. The frightened victim disappears. In her place stands a woman of pure, unadulterated authority. She straightens her shoulders. She lifts her chin. The fire in her eyes, once flickering with defiance, now burns with the cold, steady flame of command. She looks at Rollins' hand on her arm with disdain. He snatches it back as if her skin were red-hot iron. She then turns her gaze to Corbin. The look she gives him is not one of anger or triumph. It is the look of an entomologist studying a particularly repulsive insect. "Assessment complete, Director," she says, her voice now crisp, clear, and devoid of any previous tremor. "Director." The word hangs in the air, another bomb detonating in the shattered silence. The local law enforcement apparatus is compromised, Imani continues, her voice ringing with clinical precision. Detective Miles Corbin is either grossly incompetent or actively obstructing justice. My preliminary finding suggests both. Corbin makes a choking sound. "Agent? Director? What the hell is going on here?" he sputters, looking wildly between them. This is a joke. She's a librarian. I checked her myself." The man in the suit, Director Harrison, finally turns his attention to Corbin. A small, thin smile touches his lips. It is a smile of immense satisfaction. It holds no warmth, no humor. It is the smile of a predator that has just watched its prey walk willingly into a trap. Imani Wallace is a librarian at the public library on the East Side, Harrison says, his voice dangerously calm. That is her cover. A cover she has maintained for the last 18 months while investigating systemic corruption and cold case mishandling in this city. Her real title is Special Agent Imani Wallace, lead investigator for the FBI's Special Task Force on Civil Rights Violations. The power dynamic in the room does not just shift. It shatters. It inverts with the force of a physical explosion. One moment, Miles Corbin was the king, the absolute authority in his grimy castle. The next, he is nothing. Less than nothing. He is a specimen pinned to a board. And you, Detective, Harrison adds, his voice dropping an octave, have just made yourself the primary subject of her investigation. Corbin stumbles back a step, bumping into his own desk. The throne now looks like an executioner's block. His kingdom is in ruins. And he has just met the woman who has come to salt the earth. Imani steps away from the door, no one daring to touch her now. She walks past Corbin, not even gracing him with a glance. She moves toward the large whiteboard at the front of the bullpen, the one Corbin uses for his self-congratulatory briefings. She picks up a dry erase marker. The entire room watches, rapt. This is no longer a precinct. It is her classroom. Lillian Thompson, she says, writing the name at the top of the board. Age 16. Disappeared Tuesday night. Last seen at the bus stop on the corner of Elm and Parker. She draws a small X on a rough map of the city she sketches from memory. Detective Corbin's current theory, according to the press, is a runaway. His team is focusing on friends, boyfriends, and social media activity. She looks at Corbin. Is that correct, detective? He just stares, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. I'll take your silence as a yes, she says, turning back to the board. Now, let's look at the data you chose to ignore. She writes another name under Lily's. Tasha Williams. Age 14. Disappeared 15 years ago. A Tuesday. Last seen at the bus stop on the corner of Elm and Richmond. 2 blocks away from Lily. She draws another X on the map. Lead detective, Miles Corbin. Case status, closed. Cold. Another name. Maria Flores. Age 17. Disappeared 12 years ago. A Tuesday. Last seen at the bus stop on the corner of Oak and Parker. 1 block away. Another X. Lead detective on initial investigation, Miles Corbin. Case status, closed. Cold. She adds 2 more names to the board. Chloe Jenkins. Anika Sharma. Each name is a ghost. Each name is an indictment. Each name has the same details. A Tuesday. A bus stop within the same 3-block radius. And a case file that bears the signature of Detective Miles Corbin before it was buried forever. 5 girls in 15 years, Imani says, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. All from the same small area. All on the same day of the week. This isn't a pattern. It's a signature. A predator has been operating in this neighborhood for over a decade, and this precinct has been willfully blind to it. She turns to face the room. The only significant variable that changed was the victim's profile. When a pretty, blonde girl from the wealthy side of town went missing, it became national news. When it was girls of color from working-class families, it wasn't even worth a full investigation. She places the marker down with a sharp click. The man who took Lillian Thompson is the same man who took the others. He's a serial predator. And he's been allowed to operate with impunity because the man in charge of catching him, she points the marker at Corbin, didn't think his victims were worth saving. Corbin finally finds his voice. It is a pathetic, strangled sound. This is ridiculous. It's conjecture. You have no proof. Proof. Imani's laugh is a cold, sharp thing. Oh, I have proof. Let's talk about the Tasha Williams file. She turns her gaze to Officer Rollins, who tries to shrink behind a filing cabinet. Officer Rollins. According to the evidence log for the Williams case, a witness statement was taken from a Mr. Henderson, the night shift janitor at the library near the bus stop. He claimed he saw a girl matching Tasha's description being forced into a blue utility van. That statement is no longer in the case file. I'd like to know why. Rollins begins to sweat profusely. His eyes dart toward Corbin, a panic plea for help. He receives none. Corbin is a statue of crumbling arrogance. Answer the agent, officer, Director Harrison says quietly. The threat is implicit. Rollins cracks instantly. The transactional loyalty of the corrupt is worthless under pressure. He told me to lose it, Rollins stammers, pointing a trembling finger at Corbin. The detective. He said the witness was an old drunk, unreliable. He said it would just confuse the case. He told me to shred it. A collective gasp goes through the room. This is not just incompetence. This is a crime. Tampering with evidence. Burying a lead in a child abduction case. Corbin's face turns a blotchy, mottled shade of red and white. He's lying. Corbin roars, his voice cracking. He's a coward trying to save his own skin. Are you, Officer Rollins? Imani asks, her voice soft, almost gentle. Because lying to a federal agent is a very serious crime. Much more serious than your career ending today. We can add that to the list of charges, if you'd like. Rollins shakes his head frantically. No. I'm not lying. It's the truth. He made me do it. The other detectives in the room, the ones who had laughed at Imani, the ones who had enabled Corbin's reign for years, now look at him with a new expression. Contempt. And fear. They are distancing themselves, creating a quarantine zone around the man who is now radioactive. His kingdom has not just fallen. Its citizens are now looting the castle. Corbin, seeing his entire world dissolving around him, completely shatters. The last vestiges of his composure crumble into dust. You can't do this, he screams, his voice a raw, desperate shriek. This is my precinct. I have rights. You have no jurisdiction here. You're a diversity hire with a vendetta. He lunges toward Imani, his face a twisted mask of impotent rage. Director Harrison's two agents move with liquid speed, intercepting him. They each grab an arm, restraining him easily. He struggles against them, a wild animal caught in a snare. You have no authority here, he bellows, spittle flying from his lips. Actually, detective, we do, Imani says, her voice chillingly calm. She nods to Director Harrison. Harrison pulls a folded document from his breast pocket. He unfolds it and holds it up for all to see. This is a federal warrant, Harrison announces, his voice booming through the room. Signed by a federal judge less than an hour ago. It authorizes Special Agent Wallace and her team to take full control of the Lilly and Thompson investigation and any related cold cases. He takes a step toward the struggling Corbin. It also authorizes us, he continues, his voice dropping to a low, cold whisper, to seize any and all materials related to your official duties. Your office. Your files. Your computer. Your phone. He pauses, letting the weight of his words sink in. This warrant, Detective Corbin, gives Agent Wallace your entire career. And right now, she's holding it in the palm of her hand. Corbin stops struggling. He sags in the agent's grip, the fight draining out of him. Defeat, absolute and total, settles over him like a shroud. But Imani is not finished. There is one final act to this public execution. One final nail to be hammered into the coffin of his arrogance. You said I have no proof, detective, she says, reaching into the pocket of her simple cardigan. She pulls out a small, digital audio recorder. I found that when dealing with men like you, it's always best to have a record. You see, I knew you would dismiss me. I knew you wouldn't listen. I counted on it. She presses a button. Her own voice, soft and nervous, fills the room. It's about Lilly and Thompson. I think I have some information. Then, Corbin's voice, dripping with condescension. A pattern. Let me guess. You cracked the case. The entire conversation plays out. Every sneer. Every insult. Every dismissal. The precinct listens, in horrified silence, to their celebrated detective mocking a woman for trying to help. They hear him laugh about a dead girl named Tasha Williams. They hear him threaten Imani with prison. They hear his undisguised racism, his towering ego, his absolute certainty that he is untouchable. The recording is a mirror, and in it, every person in the room sees the ugly truth of the 17th precinct. They see the monster they allowed to rule them. When the recording finishes with Corbin's furious shout to get her out of my sight, an oppressive silence descends. It is the sound of a career ending. It is the sound of a man's world burning to ash around him. Corbin just hangs there, limp, his head bowed. He has nothing left. No bluster. No threats. No rage. Only the pathetic, hollow shell of a man who has been utterly and completely exposed. Director Harrison looks at Imani and gives a single, sharp nod. It is the signal. The two federal agents holding Corbin release him, only to spin him around and slam him against his own desk. The scepter-like coffee mug topples over, spilling its cold, black contents across the dusty commendations. Miles Corbin, one of the agents, says, his voice flat and official, "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and multiple violations of federal civil rights law." The sharp, metallic click of handcuffs being ratcheted tight echoes through the bullpen. They pull him to his feet, his hands now shackled behind his back. He is no longer a king. He is just a prisoner in his own fallen kingdom. They begin the walk of shame, leading him through the maze of desks, past the faces of the officers who once feared and revered him. No one meets his eye. They stare at their desks, at their computer screens, at the floor. They are all complicit, and they know it. As they reach the door, Corbin's head snaps up. He looks back, his eyes wild, searching for Imani. He finds her, standing by the whiteboard, a silent, watching figure of judgment. A last, desperate surge of defiance courses through him. "You think you've won," he screams, his voice raw and hoarse. "You're nothing. You hear me? A nobody in a cheap sweater. You just got lucky." Imani watches him, her expression unreadable. She takes a few steps toward him, stopping just out of his reach. She speaks, her voice not rising, yet it carries to every corner of the room. It is the final word. The epitaph for his career. "That's where you're wrong, detective. My sweater is from a discount store. My car is 12 years old. I live in a small apartment on the east side. Everything you saw today was real." She pauses, letting him absorb the truth. "You saw a black woman from the wrong side of town. You saw a librarian. You saw everything you expected to see, and it made you blind." Her eyes, cold and clear, lock onto his. "You never saw the person who was coming to take everything from you. Your mistake wasn't just dismissing my tip. Your mistake was in believing that a person who looks like me couldn't possibly be the one to bring you down." She turns away from him, a final, complete dismissal. "Your mistake," she adds, almost as an afterthought, "was dismissing me." The federal agents haul the now sobbing Miles Corbin out the door and into the harsh, unforgiving light of day. The king is gone. The reign is over. The fallout is swift. It is brutal. It is absolute. Miles Corbin, stripped of his badge and his bravado, faces a federal trial. He is a pathetic figure on the stand, a man shrunken by the weight of his own exposed corruption. The audio recording is played for the jury. Tasha Williams' mother testifies, her voice filled with a grief that 15 years could not erase. Officer Rollins, granted immunity, details years of evidence tampering and casual racism, all under Corbin's direction. The verdict is a formality. Guilty. On all counts. The judge, a woman who looks at Corbin with undisguised contempt, makes an example of him. He is sentenced to 25 years in a federal penitentiary. No possibility of parole. His pension is seized by the state, the funds redirected to a newly established victims advocacy group. His name is physically chiseled off the precinct's wall of honor. In prison, stripped of his authority, he is just another inmate. He is a nobody. A ghost. Forgotten, just like the victims he once erased. The consequences ripple outward. Officer Rollins is dishonorably discharged from the force. He can never carry a badge again. He lives in shame, working a menial job, forever branded as the coward who enabled a monster. The police chief of the 17th precinct is forced into an early, disgraceful retirement, his legacy forever tainted by the rot that festered under his command. The entire department is placed under a federal consent decree, a long, humiliating process of reform overseen by the very people they once scorned. But for every villain's downfall, there is a hero's rise. With the full resources of the FBI at her command, Special Agent Imani Wallace does what Miles Corbin couldn't be bothered to do. She hunts. Using the shredded notes she had painstakingly recreated, she focuses on the blue utility van from the janitor's lost statement. Within 24 hours, they have a suspect. A quiet, unassuming man who lived in the neighborhood for 2 decades. A man who was once questioned by Corbin in the Williams case and dismissed as harmless. They raid his house. In a soundproofed room in his basement, they find Lillian Thompson. She is alive. Traumatized, but alive. The reunion with her family is a scene of pure, unadulterated joy that makes every news channel. The predator confesses to all 5 kidnappings. The families of Tasha, Maria, Chloe, and Anika finally get answers. They get justice. The city issues a formal, public apology to each family. They receive substantial financial settlements, a poor substitute for their loss, but a tangible admission of the city's guilt. Imani Wallace becomes a quiet hero. She shuns the media spotlight, but her work does not go unnoticed. She is promoted to lead a new, permanent national task force within the Justice Department. Its mission, to investigate cold cases in marginalized communities, to give voice to the forgotten. The initiative is officially named the Tasha Williams Justice Project. Her name, once erased by a corrupt detective, is now a symbol of hope and change, etched into the very fabric of the justice system. 1 year later. The scene is not a grimy precinct, but a state-of-the-art lecture hall at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. The room is filled with the best and brightest new recruits. They are young, eager, and diverse, a world away from the stale, pale cynicism of the 17th precinct. At the podium stands Special Agent Imani Wallace. She wears a crisp, dark suit, a uniform of power and respect. The nervous librarian is a distant memory, a role she played to perfection. This is who she truly is. A leader. A protector. An agent of change. Behind her, carved into the polished wood of the lecture hall wall, are the words, the Tasha Williams Auditorium. She looks out at the faces of the future of law enforcement. The most dangerous criminals you will ever face, she begins, her voice calm and steady, resonating with an authority earned through fire, are not always the ones holding a gun. They are not always the ones lurking in the shadows. She pauses, letting her words settle. Sometimes, the most dangerous criminals wear a badge. They sit behind a desk. They wield power not as a shield to protect the innocent, but as a weapon to enforce their own prejudices. She tells them the story of Miles Corbin. Not as a tale of triumph, but as a cautionary lesson. A warning. He saw what he wanted to see, she concludes, her eyes scanning the room, meeting the gaze of each recruit. A cheap cardigan. A nervous woman. A waste of his time. He built a story in his head based on his own bigotry, and that story made him feel powerful. It made him feel safe. But arrogance is a blindfold. Prejudice is a cage you build for yourself. Her final words land with the force of a verdict. Never, ever underestimate someone based on the story you tell yourself about them. Look at the person in front of you. Listen to what they have to say. Because you might just be ignoring the one person who has all the answers. Or you might just be talking to the person who has come to burn your world to the ground.